Hello there, I'm Scotty, you're not. Welcome back to Halloween Horror Month. We're talking about The Exorcist 3. So this is a rewatch. This is a revisited review. I didn't review this last year, but I figured if I was redoing this, I had to do all of them. If I was doing the Exorcist movies, I gotta do them all, including the ninth configuration, which is on Tubi, and I am going to do after I do the two prequels. Okay, so the reason I mentioned that is that Blatty had something to do with that movie, and it told the story of the astronaut. I probably should have watched it before this. The astronaut that, Reagan warned was going to die out there. So fast forward, 1983, and William Peter Blatty, wrote a sequel to The Exorcist. It was originally a script. He turned it into a novel, and it was called Legion. Well, eventually, some people, they wanted to make a movie, right? Movie about that, using the Legion script. It went to Morgan Creek, the production company Morgan Creek, who sold it to 20th Century Fox. And now, according to that, Warner Brothers, even though it says 20th Century Fox on Wikipedia. I don't know. So, Morgan Creek gave William Peter Blatty carte blanche, and he not only wrote the script, he directed it, because he wanted to get William Friedkin. William Friedkin said, no, fuck off, and so in came, so Blatty just directed it himself. He shot it, he wrote it, he shot it, he got it done as Legion, and when the movie was done, Morgan Creek took a look at the film, and they said, basically, hey, there's no exorcism in this movie. And he said, yeah, I know, because Legion itself, as a script and a novel, was a crime thriller with some supernatural elements. Morgan Creek said, well, you can't have an exorcist movie without an exorcism. Problem here is it's not an exorcist movie. It's Legion. But, steadfast as always, Morgan Creek said, no, there needs to be an exorcism in this movie. Do it. So, not only did they have to change the ending of this film, they also shoehorned in a new character, Father Morning, and while they're at it, they brought back Jason Miller, because originally Jason Miller was not in this film. They wanted him to come back. He wasn't available, whether or not he was doing something else, or he was, too alcoholed up to remember lines. Which one you would believe, I don't know. So we have Brad Dourif as the Gemini killer, who is possessing Father Karras' body. But apparently, according to Morgan Creek, audiences aren't smart enough to put two and two together, to get potato, of course, because 2 and 2 equals potato, but also to figure out that it's Father Karras' body that looks like Brad Dourif's Gemini killer, or X, Patient X, whatever. No. This sequel is sort of a continuation of the version you've never seen version, the extended version of The Exorcist released in 2000, as it follows on the deleted ending of that version, where Father Dyer and Lieutenant Kinderman, they're friends, they go to watch movies. At the beginning of this movie, they go to see It's a Wonderful Life, right? And so this movie is said to be taking place 15 years after the first film. The issue is, this movie is set in 1990. That's 17 years after the first film. However, at the end of the film, there is a gravestone for Father Karras that says, died 1975, which means the first film technically took place in 1975, which is confusing. But I think it's because they had to stick to the 15 years thing. And the ending does come out of nowhere because, again, the ending was a reshoot. The whole climax of the film is a reshoot, and the very end was actually scenes taken from earlier on in the film. You see, there's a whole other character that's missing from this, Brother Fane, who's looking over Karis' body. There's a deleted opening in which Kinderman is examining Karis' body after the events of the original film. And his body is taken to the morgue, and while Brother Fane is watching over him, he takes Brother Fane, shoves him in there. They find him, later in a scene where they go to, after, it's in, this part is in the film, the theatrical version, where when Kinderman sees the patient X for the first time, he sees Damien Karras. So he has the body exhumed. And they find Father Morning. They reuse some of the footage, place it at the end of the film as if to say, oh, we're putting Father Karras' body back in the ground. But that's not what it is. And conspicuously, Grandel Bush's character, who disappears partway through the film, is present there. Which doesn't make that much sense until I found out that was taken from earlier in the film. Which it does make sense because he would have been there because he was his partner at the beginning of the film. Partway through the film, he sort of disappears. He doesn't die per se, but he sort of disappears. He's just not present because Kinderman is the focus. Also, I don't think he was there for the reshoots, which is why. So, yeah. But there was no one more upset about how this film turned out than George C. Scott himself, who played Kinderman in this version. You see, Kinderman signed up for a crime drama. And when it became a genre film, he got pissed. Because that's not what he signed up for. He did The Changeling in 1980. He didn't want to do another one, But Morgan Creek, of course. And I don't think this is the last time we'll be hearing about Morgan Creek in the Exorcist franchise because, there's a reason why there's two prequels. They're technically the same movie, but not. We'll get to that. So, this whole story is about people are getting killed, right? And they don't know who it is. It has the markings of the Gemini killer. And the patient in the cell, patient X, says he is the Gemini killer. And according to Kinderman, he looks like Father Karras. And we see that. Again, though, it wasn't supposed to be that. Brad Dourif was supposed to be patient X, Gemini killer, whatever, through the entire film. But then they added Karras in. It was supposed to be implied that this was Karras' body, but all we could ever see was Dourif, who is confirmed to be the Gemini killer through like a file that Kinderman looks at. So that's why. Because it's taken over his soul, or whatever, his body. Now, I also assumed that adding in the Master, like, the Master put me here, it's implied to be Pazuzu, and I think I was thinking that is either the Master was implied to be, it's either reshoots or, because I hear that the original stuff with Dourif is in a different cell, or it is the devil himself. Damn the devil! Damn the devil himself! Herself, whatever. But yeah. Now let me just talk about the performances here. Now, reshoots or not, Dourif gives a great performance. It's too bad that off and on, through most of it, his voice is modulated. You do not need to modulate Brad Dourif's voice. His voice is menacing enough. but they modulate it to make it deeper because you're supposed to be possessed, you see. That is the reshoots, and that's fucking stupid. You do not. That's basically nerfing his voice. You do not need to modulate Brad Dourif's voice. He's menacing enough. He was already fucking Chucky by this point. And you modulate his voice. You do not need to do that. On the other side, Jason Miller does a decent job. I do like this shot they do. Where he is Father Karras through the first part of this scene. And then the screen goes real close to his eyes, like this, and then it backs away, and it's now Brad Dourif. I love that shot. And they do another thing similar later when the Gemini Killer like goes like this. He sees the Gemini Killer, and then you hear, "Bill, help me, please." And when he turns back, he's Karras again. But then he says, "Damien?" And then all of a sudden, boom, he's back to being Gemini Killer again, Brad Dourif. No! You know, it's great. It's great. And there are some great horror-like scenes, like the scene where Kinnaman's walking around the ward, and there's an old lady climbing on the ceiling. He doesn't notice it, but you know. And then there's that jump scare. The jump scare I mentioned before, right? Jump scare I mentioned before, where Nurse, she's checking on things. And I do like to build up to this, because during one of the visits that Kinnaman has with Gemini, he keeps talking about Amy. He's going to go after Amy. And so this woman, this nurse, she's checking stuff, right? And when she looks at one, there's a false jump scare with this guy. "Hey, I'm going to report you. What's your name?" And she says, "Amy," whatever her last name is. And I went, "Oh, she's Amy." It clicked in my head, you know. And then she goes to leave, and she hears a noise in his room. She goes in the room. She turns on the light. She looks around, nothing there. Again, it's all a static shot of a hallway. It's a static shot like this, like of a hallway. It's a long hallway. The camera does not move to see her, except for when she goes in the room with that cheap jump scare with that guy. Other than that, it's the hallway. So, when I say she goes in, we see her go in, we don't follow her. I'm assuming she looks around, she comes back out, she goes shut the door, opens it again, turns the light off, shuts and locks the door, goes to walk away, creepy nun comes out, grabs her. And we find out that she's dead. Not only that, now, at the beginning of this, we find out that he's following the Gemini Killer's MO. The real MO, because they gave a false one to the news reports to suss out any of the weirdos. But Gemini Killer's MO of cutting off their heads, like the pinky, and putting the thing on there. And draining out, but then there's the thing about draining all the blood out of the system as well, like he does with Father Dyer. And here, he splits her down the middle and takes out all her organs, replaces it with rosary beads, and sews it back up again. That's not what he said. Also, every victim is supposed to start with K. Her last name is Keating. Just remember that. And the 3 victims at the beginning all had a K in their name somewhere or other, and they were connected to the original case with Reagan McNeil. One of the priests that died was connected to Father Dyer. And the others, Father Dyer, also, or at least Father Karras. And Father Dyer, his middle name was Kevin. And then the little boy, Thomas, had his last name started with K. And his mother was connected somehow. I don't remember exactly, but she was connected somehow, so the boy died. And we have this dream sequence that Kinnaman has towards the beginning of the film, where you have Fabio and Patrick Ewing and Samuel L. Goddamn Jackson, who's dubbed over, in this heaven landscape. And you have this little boy, Thomas, and it's so nonchalant because like, "Oh, hi, Thomas. I'm sorry you were murdered. I miss you." I'm just like, who says it like that? But the little boy has the stitches around his neck. And then you see Father Dyer, who last time we saw was still alive. But he's there. He's got the stitches around his neck. And he says, calls him by his first name. He's like, "What are you doing here?" Then he wakes up and he gets the news. He's dead. I love that. There's subtlety in this that works. And it's all taken away by the climax of the goddamn film. And I know what the original version of the film was, or the ending was, but this just seems a little too much. But before we get there, there is a moment in which we find out that a patient has gone missing. She's taken off, and the nurse that he was talking to throughout the film says that she was gone. He realizes, because the Gemini killer has been hinting at him also subtly, that his daughter was going to be a victim, just like with Amy. Because he goes there, first of all, he goes there to check on Amy's body. And then he gets called in to talk to the doctor, chain smoker guy, who is constantly chain smoking. And we find out there's a scene where he's reading a speech, and then he puts it in his desk when Kinderman comes in and he starts reading it, and there's a part where he goes like this to read it. We find out that the Gemini killer talked him into doing that, I guess. And then he committed suicide. Lethal injection. So then Kinderman realizes his daughter is in trouble because, Karis was talking to, not Karis, but Gemini was talking about the dance. His daughter dances, so that's the connection. So he calls to his wife, but the call his wife gets is from the Gemini killer telling him a nurse is on the way bringing them something. But the nurse is Vivica Lindfors, who is the Catherine from Stargate, but she is a mental patient, not a nurse. She's dressed up like a nurse because they killed another nurse, I guess. I don't know this to me. Anyway, it wasn't Amy. It wasn't Keaton. It wasn't Nurse Keaton. It was a different one. But anyway, so Kinderman rushes home, and they get there, and he goes in and he sees that the patient is there. And this patient, I think I mentioned this in my first review, has these big ass shears that is all the way around the neck of the daughter before some old lady pulls her out of the way. There's no mark on the daughter's neck. There's nothing. Bullshit. There have been some kind of mark, some kind of damage. It's just, I find that to be bullshit. But anyway, he's taken back to the hospital, and then because at this point, our reshot ending comes in. And so, he screams out, "Morning!" And I think what the original version of this scene was, after finding out that trying to kill his daughter, Kinderman goes back to the hospital and shoots Gemini, Karis, killing him. I've seen a shot of he puts the gun up to the head of Brad Dourif and pulls the trigger. Subtle, but it would work for what Blatty's original vision was. Born Creek said, "Fuck you, we want an exorcism," so here we go. Father Morning gets shoved back into the film again. And he just shows up at the ward. There is no announcement of him. He's just there. He goes in, he starts the exorcism, which does shit all, by the way. As he's thrown up against the wall, his skull comes off, because it's got to be gruesome, it's got to be scary, it's got to be like The Exorcist. And being as nothing in the rest of the film was anything like the original Exorcist, save for maybe, Vivica Lindfors talking like Brad Dourif, which could have been a reshot, or maybe just the part where she falls down and says "morning" was probably a reshoot. But the crawling on the ceiling and the jump scare and a few other odd occurrences, but again, it was always meant to be a thriller with supernatural stuff going on. This changes it from that to a straight up horror film. because this is just completely everything. They just said, okay, everything that was right in the exorcism, throw it at the ending. And there's fire, there's snakes, there's a bunch of everything. There's Father Morning's skull getting ripped off. Everything. Kinderman comes in, and Father Morning falls down. And then Father Morning is eventually able to regain consciousness and get Father Karras to fight. He then wakes up and he says, "Now, Bill, shoot now! Kill me now!" Fires a few shots. Dead. And then we have that scene at the end, which I said was supposed to be earlier on in the film, which confirms that the first film took place in 1975, and that's only because they wanted it to be 15 years. Because they wrote 15 years and they realized, oh wait, that was 73. Let's just say it took place in 75. I bet if you rewatch The Exorcist, you could think, well, there's quite a few things going on. Like even the movie that Father Dyer goes to see in those movies, But regardless, this is still a really good film. I mean, it's a slow burner for sure. But it's not. So was the first one to get up to those exorcism scenes. But it's not as long. And even though there's a lot of talky scenes, I think they work. Because you have George C. Scott, you have Brad Dourif, and even for the reshoots, Jason Miller does a great job. So I think it all comes together really good. And I'm going to say that when it comes to The Exorcist 3, it's very, very highly pretty good. Now, I can't say that if you flip the endings around, it would work. Because I don't know if just the scene where he goes in and shooting him. I think maybe a different kind of ending. Maybe not going way out of nowhere with the whole exorcism thing. And shoehorning Father Morning in. Maybe something different, But yeah. I really enjoy this movie. And I don't know anymore. I used to say this was better than the first. I have to think on it. And we'll know by my ranking, which I'm going to also include the 9th configuration in there. But I don't know anymore. I don't know anymore. But next we'll be tackling the prequels, starting with The Exorcist: The Beginning, directed by Rennie Harlan. Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, thank you for watching. I've been Scotty, and I'll see you in the next one.